The sea was ink-black beneath the vast, star-studded sky, and the air was thick with the acrid scent of salt, and the boat creaked and groaned as it bobbed rhythmically against the current. I, a lone fisherman, found myself engulfed in the oppressive silence that only the open sea can provide. The night had settled in like a shroud, and my small boat felt like a fragile vessel navigating through the unknown. The only companions I had were the rhythmic slaps of water against the hull and the distant, haunting calls of unseen seabirds. I shivered involuntarily, a chill crawling up my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. My lantern flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to whisper secrets in the darkness. The fishing gear lay in disarray at the back of the boat, and the once familiar scent of bait now seemed alien and foreboding. Despite the familiarity of the routine, an unease settled over me like a heavy fog. As I cast my net into the void below, the silence was broken by a distant, mournful howl that sent shivers through my entire being. It was a sound I had never heard before, something unnatural and unsettling. I tried to convince myself that it was just the wind playing tricks on my ears, but deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. The first catch came easy, and I felt a surge of relief as the silver glint of fish filled my net. Yet, as I hauled it in, I couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes were watching me from the fathomless depths. The sea had become a vast, inky abyss, and I was but a speck on its surface. With each pull of the net, the unease grew. The once rhythmic creaking of the boat now seemed discordant, like a warped melody played by unseen hands. I glanced over the side of the boat into the murky water, half expecting to see a pair of malevolent eyes staring back at me. But there was nothing, just the undulating darkness. As I continued my solitary task, the howling in the distance persisted, now joined by an eerie chorus of whispers that seemed to rise from the very depths of the sea. My hands trembled as I worked, the fish slipping through my fingers like quicksilver. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, that the solitude of the open sea was playing tricks on my mind. But then, out of the blackness, a shape emerged. At first, it was just a shadow, a silhouette against the inky expanse. But as it drew nearer, dread clenched at my heart like a vice. It was a boat, or at least the remnants of one. Torn sails flapped in the wind, and the wood was weathered and splintered as if it had been adrift for centuries. I stared, paralyzed by a mixture of fear and curiosity, as the ghostly vessel passed by. The whispers grew louder, now a cacophony of unintelligible voices that clawed at the edges of my sanity. I called out, my voice lost in the wind, but the spectral boat sailed on, disappearing into the night as mysteriously as it had come. With a trembling hand, I pulled in my net, the once abundant catch now reduced to a meager handful of fish. The lantern flickered and died, plunging me into total darkness. Panic set in, and I fumbled for a spare match, my hand shaking as I struggled to relight the lantern. And then, in the blackness, a cold hand gripped my shoulder. I froze, the match dropping from my fingers. The whispers reached a fevered pitch, and the howling in the distance crescendoed into a blood-curdling scream. I dared not turn around, the dread consuming me like a voracious tide. In that moment, I felt a presence behind me, something unnatural and malevolent. The boat rocked, not with the gentle ebb and flow of the sea, but with a violent, otherworldly force. The whispers coalesced into a chilling chant, words I couldn't understand, but that filled me with a primal terror. Summoning every ounce of courage, I finally turned, the match flaring to life for a brief, ghastly moment. There, standing at the edge of the boat, was a figure draped in tattered, seaweed-covered rags. Its eyes glowed a sickly green, reflecting the eerie light of the dying match. A skeletal hand reached out, fingers like claws, and in that moment, I knew I was not alone on the open sea. The match extinguished, and the boat was plunged into darkness once more. The whispers faded, replaced by a guttural, haunting laughter that echoed over the water. I stumbled backward, desperate to escape the unseen horror that now lurked in the shadows. As I fumbled for another match, the laughter grew louder, more deranged. And then, just as the match flared to life, the laughter stopped. The figure had vanished, leaving only the oppressive silence and the inky blackness of the open sea. With trembling hands, I lit the lantern once more, its feeble glow casting feeble light on the empty expanse of the boat. The whispers had ceased, and the howling had faded into the distance. I was alone again, surrounded by the vast emptiness of the open sea. But the memory of that spectral encounter lingered, a ghostly presence that clung to the air like a damp fog. I shuddered, my hands still trembling as I cast my net once more into the inky abyss. The night stretched on, the waves continuing their relentless dance, and I, a mere speck on the vast canvas of the sea, sailed into the unknown, haunted by the horrors that lurked beneath the surface. The moon cast an eerie glow on the dense canopy of trees as I ventured into the heart of the woods, the only source of light in the pitch-black night. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine, and the distant rumble of thunder echoed through the stillness. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end as the ominous atmosphere enveloped me. The narrow trail wound its way through the ancient trees, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The rustling leaves overhead seemed to whisper secrets, and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot made my heart skip a beat. I tried to shake off the growing unease, convincing myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. The darkness deepened as the trail led me further into the heart of the forest. The only sounds were my own footsteps and the distant howl of the wind. The trees stood like silent sentinels, their shadows dancing menacingly on the forest floor. I couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes were watching my every move. A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the woods, casting sharp shadows that seemed to come alive. The thunder that followed was deafening, reverberating through the trees and shaking the ground beneath me. I quickened my pace, the urgency to escape the suffocating darkness taking hold. As I pressed on, the trail began to narrow, the trees closing in around me like an impenetrable wall. The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying with it an indistinct murmur that sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer alone in the woods. My flashlight flickered, casting weak beams of light that barely penetrated the oppressive darkness. Panic clawed at the edges of my mind as I fumbled to replace the batteries, the darkness seeming to close in with each passing second. The forest was alive with unseen movements, and the air grew colder, sending a chill down my spine. Another flash of lightning revealed a dilapidated structure in the distance, a long-forgotten cabin that stood as a relic of the past. Despite the ominous aura surrounding it, desperation drove me towards the shelter it promised. The wind howled through the trees, creating an eerie symphony that seemed to mock my every step. As I approached the cabin, the air became thick with an unidentifiable scent, something rotten and putrid. I hesitated at the entrance, my instincts warning me of the sinister energy that emanated from within. The creaking door swung open with a mournful groan, revealing the decaying interior of the cabin. The floor creaked beneath my weight as I cautiously stepped inside. The feeble beams of my flashlight revealed ancient furniture covered in dust cloths, and cobwebs adorned every corner. The air inside was stifling, carrying with it a sense of foreboding that settled in the pit of my stomach. The cabin seemed frozen in time, a relic of a forgotten era. I couldn't shake the feeling that the walls held secrets, whispers of a past that refused to be forgotten. Thunder rumbled overhead, the sound reverberating through the decaying structure like a warning from the very depths of the forest. As I explored the desolate cabin, the air grew colder, and an otherworldly chill seeped into my bones. Shadows danced on the walls, taking shape and form as if the very essence of the forest had materialized within the cabin's confines. A whisper echoed through the air, indistinct words that sent a shiver down my spine. The storm outside intensified, the rain drumming on the cabin roof like a macabre melody. My breath caught in my throat as I turned a corner, coming face to face with a weathered mirror. In its reflection, my own eyes stared back at me, wide with terror. A voice, not my own, echoed in the small space, whispering ancient words that resonated with malevolence. The walls seemed to close in, the air thickening with a suffocating weight. Panic gripped me as I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest. In that moment, the cabin transformed into a twisted labyrinth, its halls extending into an abyss of darkness. I ran, the oppressive atmosphere pushing me forward, my footsteps echoing in the hollow space. The unseen presence grew more tangible, a malevolent force that seemed to feed on my fear. As I burst out of the cabin, the storm outside reached its crescendo. Lightning illuminated the forest, revealing the twisted trees and the suffocating darkness that surrounded me. Thunder roared overhead, drowning out the desperate beating of my heart. With every step, the forest seemed to resist my escape. The trees twisted and contorted, their branches reaching out like spectral hands. The air crackled with energy, and the shadows danced with a life of their own. The storm became a symphony of chaos, each element working in tandem to ensnare me in its clutches. I stumbled and fell, the muddy ground clinging to me like the grasp of unseen hands. The forest seemed to close in, its malevolent presence consuming me. As the storm raged on, I became one with the darkness, a lost soul swallowed by the ancient woods. The shadows danced on the walls as the flickering flame of the lone candle struggled against the encroaching darkness. I lay in bed, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The wind outside howled like a tormented soul, and the branches scraped against the window like bony fingers begging to be let in. It all started when I moved into the old Victorian house on the outskirts of town. The realtor had assured me it was a steal, a hidden gem with a rich history. Little did I know, the history it held was one of terror and despair. The first night, I heard whispers in the corridors, faint murmurs that seemed to echo through the ages. I dismissed it as my imagination, a consequence of an overactive mind in a new environment. As days turned into nights, the whispers grew louder. I would wake in the dead of night, drenched in sweat, convinced that someone, or something, was watching me. The antique furniture creaked under the weight of unseen footsteps, and the air hung heavy with a presence I couldn't explain. I tried to convince myself it was just an old house settling, but the unsettling feeling persisted. One evening, as I was flipping through the dusty pages of an ancient photo album I found in the attic, I stumbled upon a faded picture of a family. The eyes of the people in the photograph bore into mine. Their expressions were a haunting mixture of sorrow and fear. It was as if the photograph held a secret, a tale untold. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the image of a little girl, her face pallid, her eyes wide with a terror that transcended the confines of the photograph. That night, the whispers reached a crescendo. They were no longer confined to the shadows. They enveloped the room like a suffocating fog. I felt a cold breeze, though the windows were tightly shut. A flickering candle dimmed as an otherworldly force seemed to drain the life out of it. Trembling, I ventured into the hallway, following the ethereal voices that beckoned me. The air grew colder as I descended the creaky staircase. The whispers led me to a door I hadn't noticed before, a door that seemed to materialize out of the darkness. The handle turned with an eerie squeak as I pushed it open, revealing a room frozen in time. Dust-covered furniture lay draped in tattered sheets, and the air hung heavy with the scent of decay. In the center of the room stood a cracked mirror, its surface reflecting a distorted version of reality. As I approached, the whispers reached a fever pitch, the voices blending into a cacophony of anguish. I gazed into the mirror, and my blood ran cold. The reflection staring back at me was not my own. It was the little girl from the photograph, her hollow eyes staring into the depths of my soul. A voice, not my own, echoed in my mind, recounting a tale of tragedy that unfolded within these walls. The little girl, named Emily, had been the daughter of the family that once called this house home. They had fallen victim to a malevolent force that preyed on the innocent. I was paralyzed, trapped in a nightmarish reality that transcended the boundaries of time. Emily's voice pleaded with me to help her find peace, to lift the curse that bound her spirit to this forsaken place. The room began to shake, and the temperature plummeted as an otherworldly force manifested before me. A ghastly figure materialized, shrouded in darkness, its eyes gleaming with an insatiable hunger. Emily's voice trembled as she revealed the entity's name, Malachi, a malevolent force that fed on the fear and suffering of the living. The room echoed with the anguished cries of the trapped souls that had succumbed to its insidious grasp. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, and the temperature dropped even further. The room was plunged into darkness, the only source of light emanating from the malevolent eyes of Malachi. Emily's voice resonated in the void, guiding me through an ancient ritual that could banish the malevolent entity from this realm. With each word uttered, the room pulsated with energy. Shadows writhed and contorted, and the air crackled with an otherworldly power. I felt the weight of 1,000 eyes upon me as the ritual reached its climax. The oppressive force that had plagued the house for centuries recoiled, and Malachi let out an unearthly wail that reverberated through the walls. As the last echoes of the ritual faded, the room fell silent. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the temperature returned to normal. I found myself standing alone in the room, the cracked mirror reflecting only my own tired eyes. The whispers had ceased, and a profound stillness settled over the house. I stumbled out of the room, the events of the night leaving me drained and disoriented. The following morning, as the first rays of dawn pierced through the curtains, I felt an inexplicable sense of peace. The house, once haunted by the specters of its tragic past, now stood silent and still. I moved out shortly after, leaving the Victorian house behind. The memories of that night still lingered, a chilling reminder of the thin veil that separates the living from the realm of the supernatural.